bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons here with the HockeyWriters.com. As always, with Colton Pankiw. Colton, how you doing, buddy?
Good, Jim. Good to be back for another episode. Obviously, another trade happened since the last time we talked, so excited to get into it.
Yeah, for Oilers fans, this is still sort of new. I mean, for us, it's brand new because we, like you said, we didn't get the chance to talk about this on the last show, so it happened since then. We'll talk a little bit about Nick Bjugstad coming over from Arizona. We'll talk a little bit about what's happened since the Tyson Barrie trade for Mattias Ekholm and how he's fit in and what's happening on the power play, all that fun stuff. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about Connor McDavid because how can you not the way that he's going, and we'll address the goaltending a little bit. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Bjugstad, the newest addition to the Oilers?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, had a pretty good showing, at least in the faceoff dot this past game. So
yeah, 10 for 10. Pretty good,
yeah, I guess pretty good. A bit of an understatement. But no, I mean, I don't think personally, I was curious to get your thoughts. I didn't notice him a ton, but I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. But then obviously afterwards, like you see the face-off stat, I think it was Bob Stauffer I'd first seen it set that out. I was like, holy crap. And that's kind of one of the things I was looking at that he wasn't even necessarily great at in Arizona this season. He wasn't bad, but I think he was just a bit below 50%. So I was just kind of curious to see what you thought about his game.
Yeah, I was specifically kind of watching him to see, I didn't know he was 8 for 8 when I saw the first tweet, and then I didn't know he was 10 for 10 when the thing was over. But I do remember when he was on the ice and he was taking a faceoff, and I happened to be like, oh yeah, Nick Bjugstad's taking a faceoff. I was trying to watch to see, how he did with the draws and stuff like that. So I noticed that the ones I saw him taking, he was winning, but I had no idea that he was doing that well in terms, I didn't even know he had taken 10 faceoffs in a game. So again, that might be good, that might be bad. I probably would have been like, oh man, it doesn't look good. Like the Oilers are losing a ton of faceoffs, but they weren't. They were winning a bunch. So that was a really good sign. I obviously 10 for 10. He's not going to keep that up. Nobody will ever keep up that sort of thing. And I think he was 50% in the game before, which puts him at 75% for the 2 games that he's played so far. Man, if he can stay over 50%, that's really all you can hope for, right? Like this is, especially in certain situations, like if he's in his own zone or he's killing a penalty or whatever the case is, because those wins are extremely important. If you can get that win and get it out of the zone, you're saving yourself 15 to 20 seconds on every power play or penalty kill that you're on. So that's really good. I have liked his game. I think he played 14 minutes the other night, and he's looked pretty solid on the penalty kill. He's got that long reach that really sort of just kind of gets people down. So you can kind of catch up even if you're a little bit behind, but he doesn't seem to be out of position too often, which I've liked. And his goal that he got because it kind of crashed in the net and just putting it in on the rebound is what you want him to be doing, right? Like I don't know enough about him to know what kind of goals he was scoring in Arizona, if they were skilled goals or rebound goals or deflections or whatever. But if you're going to score here, what you need to be scoring are those juicy, greasy kind of net goals, because we got enough of the other guys scoring the other ones, right? So did you like what you saw out of him from what you noticed?
I think so. I think kind of what you were saying, especially on the kill, like with that reach, obviously you knew coming in that he was big, but he looks massive out there, I found, and just kind of has that wingspan, which is huge on the penalty kill. He's able to get his sticks in lanes, and then obviously was able to get on the board, like you said. And again, that face-off thing, there's been some guys over the years in Edmonton that they kind of had in that fourth line role that had been really good at them. They've had more recent ones, but a Boyd Gordon comes to mind where maybe not the best guy you throw out there 5-on-5, but on the kill or some areas like that where he was kind of money on the draw, they could really use a guy like that again. So, I mean, like I said, this could just kind of be a one-game mirage, but like you said, if he's able to even stay up over 50% for the stretch of the season, that would be huge.
Well, you know who he reminds me of a little bit if his face-out numbers stay up there, and not reminds me of because of his stature or anything like that. But do you remember Michael Pekka back in 2006 when the Oilers went on that run? That was why they got him, that he was a well-rounded player, that he had a little skill. He could score every once in a while. He played the penalty kill, and he won a gazillion faceoffs. If that's even remotely close to what Bjugstad can offer this team, especially come the playoffs when you kind of contribute some depth, scoring things like that, and then you're golden, right? Like that's exactly what you wanted out of a player, especially if he's making $450,000. Like, how can you possibly beat that? So yeah, so far so good. We'll see if he can keep it up. It's too small a sample size at this point to know if it's something that will maintain itself or continue. But I think it's been a good sign so far. It could be a good pickup, and that's a really good thought there. What do you make of the idea of putting him in though, and knowing that people are going to have to come out of the lineup? Like the other night, it was Clean Costin. He came out, and then against in the most recent win, they had to actually go 12-6, and Broberg came out. So we're starting to get to the point where these numbers and the quality of players that are coming in, and we're going to see this again this week. We're assuming Evander Kane is probably going to be back on Thursday. Do you ever look at the guy like Bjugstad coming out? Like, what does he have to do to keep his spot in the lineup, do you think?
I mean, again, like you said, it's not sustainable, but those face-off wins are obviously huge. Being able to contribute on the penalty kill like we saw, but as far as just having those extra guys that can come in and out, I don't think it's a bad problem at all. I think it's a good problem to have. It kind of shows the depth that the team has. And more importantly, I think it kind of gets everyone on notice, especially those bottom six guys that could be out, or kind of that 6th, 7th defenseman. Like if they have an off game, they're going to come out of the lineup. So I think it just kind of breeds internal competition, and we'll just have them playing a lot better down the stretch. So I think it says a lot to this roster that you could bring in a guy like Bjugstad, who's throughout his career been a pretty solid top 9, if not 4th line forward. So a guy like that could come in and out of the lineup, I think says a lot to the depth that this team kind of has all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, if they can stay healthy, they've got some tough choices to make, but good decisions that's what you're looking at, right? Like you've got too many options, which is always a nice thing to have. What have you made of Mattias Ekholm's game so far? He's the player that we did talk about mostly on the last show, because that was a really big trade for the Oilers, bringing in a more defensive defenseman and sending out, Tyson Barrie, who's more well-rounded than I think people give him credit for, but he's really known as an offensive guy, quarterbacking the power play. What have you liked about Ekholm so far? I mean, he's looked pretty good.
He seems to kind of bring like a calming presence to everyone so far. And I don't know if that's just been the team maybe playing better, but it seems like since he's got there's just more confidence overall on that blue line. I think he does so many things right. He's more, I don't know, physical, but like mean, I guess, than I kind of realized. Like not afraid to lay the lumber on guys. He's better offensively, I think, too, than maybe some people realize. Like he had a few seasons, I believe, north of 40 points in Nashville. So when given the opportunity, he can put up some points. And I'm kind of curious to see how he does in that regard in Edmonton. Obviously, the Predators as a team have never really been a highly offensive bunch. So I think coming to Edmonton with those two superstars, McDavid, Draisaitl, you could see his point total get up a lot more. But I just think he's been such a calming presence back there. He defensively really doesn't give up anything. And like we had said last show, tough to lose Tyson Barrie. But I mean, so far, it's hard to say anything other than the trade's been a massive win. I know, very short span, but he's looked fantastic so far.
Yeah, and you know what I've noticed, which has been really kind of cool and a little bit refreshing, is the big knock was that maybe Nashville knew he was slowing down a tiny little bit, right? Like he's getting a little bit older, he's a bigger dude, maybe he's slowing down just a little bit. But I haven't noticed that his speed has at all been a factor. Like he's not maybe the fastest guy. He has jumped up in the play and stuff, but I've also noticed that he's so positionally sound and so solid that his speed might not be a huge factor. So even if he does slow down a tiny little bit, I get the sense that he still can make up for that. Like kind of like a Duncan Keith, right? Like maybe Duncan Keith wasn't the fastest player in the world ever, but even when he wasn't as fast, and that was the big knock when he came over, oh man, he's so much slower, he can't do it. Well, he was so smart and so positionally sound all the time that he was rarely, if ever, out of position. So it didn't really matter that he couldn't keep up with McDavid or McLeod or all the speedy, like a Dylan Hall, like the fast of the fast on the Oilers. It doesn't matter that he can't keep up, right? Like he just knows where to be, knows where to go, can read the play, anticipate what's going on. He sees the play before it happens. Like, I don't know that the speed thing is going to be a huge factor. Do you think I'm wrong there?
No, because of, like you said, I think the positional play, and again, like there was kind of that talk out of Nashville, but I think the bigger concern maybe was that it could lead to slowing down because of the term still on the deal. But yeah, at this point, I don't think that's been an issue. And obviously we'll have to kind of see in the third, fourth year that contract. But again, like we talked about before, that's kind of a later problem. This team's in a win now mode, especially with the contract situations of Draisaitl and McDavid. So that's something that could become an impact, I think. But as of right now, yeah, I haven't seen anything in the few games he's played so far that suggests it's an issue right now.
One of the things that I have seen that I like as well is what he's been sort of doing for Evan Bouchard. Again, small sample size, but we did talk about this when he came over, that it wasn't just going to be about Mattias Ekholm coming in and being a more solid defensive guy and making the team overall better, but that he was going to probably be a mentor and a sort of a leader for the guys like Brobergs, the Bouchards, maybe the Nima Linens of the world, whatever and whoever he was going to be working with. I'm seeing it already in Bouchard's game. Like, he's not perfect. He's still making some mistakes, and every once in a while has trouble getting that shot through, but he's getting a lot more shots on net. He seems to be more calm. He seems to have a little bit more urgency when he goes for stuff. Like, he's got the confidence that Ekholm's going to be there for him. Like, I don't know exactly what it is, but I do get this sense that Bouchard has sort of elevated his game just a touch. And if he can continue to keep doing that game after game after game, playing with someone like Ekholm, that's a real big win factor for me in this trade if it turns out that way. And so far, Bouchard has done pretty well. He's, I think, put 3 points in 3 games since the Barrie trade. He's power play still kicking at just over 30%. It's been okay. What have you noticed about Bouchard's game? Have you seen, the good signs out of it? Have you really not noticed anything? Are you concerned about him at all?
I mean, I'm still concerned from what we had seen up into the point in the season. I haven't noticed as many things, which I think is a good thing, because obviously what was standing out through the first, whatever it would have been, 60 games or so of the season was kind of the glaring mistakes. Obviously, there was some last year, but the offense kind of masked that a bit, and it hadn't been as much this season. So I think the fact that I haven't noticed anything really glaring in the past few games is a good sign. And I think we kind of talked about, like, once he was maybe able to get on that first power play and kind of get some reps in, that could start to help build up some confidence. And I think even just seeing from a management perspective and obviously a coaching perspective too, assuming Woodcroft had a bit of a say in the move, was that they do have the confidence in him to step in and fill up that role for Barrie. So I think even just kind of having that message would help quite a bit. And so I'm kind of hoping that down the stretch of the season here, he can really at least get back to the player we saw last season, because he's obviously got that potential, and it would just make losing Barrie such a smaller loss than it could be.
I have too that they haven't necessarily, like, the old first unit power play would be on for almost all of the 2 minutes. Like, it would be 27 seconds left in a power play when they would take that unit off and put the second one on. With Bouchard here, I have noticed that, like, in the first minute, they're switching it out, right? Like, he's starting the power play almost every time, and they're either scoring right away on it, and they scored some really quick goals on a couple power plays already. Or if that first minute goes through and nothing's really kicking, they switch it out, and a guy like Nurse comes on or somebody else takes that spot. So there's, in a way, they're easing him into it. Yes, he's got to have this responsibility. He's got to sort of take over for Tyson Barrie. He's got to fit that role. But they haven't just thrown all 2 minutes of the power play at him, right? Like, they're just saying, okay, go out there in the first minute, see what you can do, and then we'll pull you if it's not working out too well. But it's not like an overabundance of ice time on the power play, which I think is key here, because he's got to, feel confident that he can do it, and so far so good. But he can't be overwhelmed with the amount of minutes that he's playing, trying to figure out, exactly. Because one of the things Tyson Barrie was so good at was knowing and reading where these other guys were going to come. So if it came back to him, he was in the right spot. If it was bounced off the boards, he was in the right spot. Bouchard has not quite figured that out yet. So if you give him too much too soon, I think that could be problematic. But right now I'm noticing it's like a minute and he's off, or they score and away you go. So it's been a good sign for me. I like that so far. If he continues this, I don't know what he's got right now, like 32 points or something. Where do you think you see him? Like, one of the things we said at the beginning of the year was we thought Bouchard could be another 50-point defenseman. Like, you think there's any shot that he starts to kicks it in gear here and it becomes like a 0.7, 0.8 per game player for the rest of the season?
I mean, on that power play, especially, anything's possible. I think that would be best case scenario. I think what kind of I'm hoping for, at least, is just a bit more solid play defensively. And I think the offense will come, whether it's this season, next. And, they don't necessarily need him to do that this year. Obviously, they've had so many guys that have stepped up in that regard, especially as of late. So I don't think that's as important. But if you can get that, obviously, it's an even bigger plus down the stretch. And I think obviously, when they drafted him as high as they did, they knew that was the potential there. And if he could, that would be great. But I do think at some point, especially now that he's kind of gotten that role, whether it's this season, next season, that offense will pick up. Whether it gets to that point this season or not, I'm not sure. But I think at some point in the future, he will be probably at least a 60-point guy there.
Yeah, as long as for this season the power play doesn't regress, then it shows that the Oilers were right in taking this gamble, right? Like, because the big knock right now is, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to the power play? Even though really it runs through McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent Hopkins, the importance of Tyson Barrie can't be overlooked. It's like he knew how to work with those three, and then whoever the fourth one is, whether it was Hyman or Evander Kane or whomever, he understood what his role was there. I think for Bouchard, he needs to make sure that doesn't take a huge step backwards. And then from there on, if next season he's the guy again and whatever, then he starts to really put it in. But so far, it's been pretty good. Like, he's getting a shot through. He's got more shots per game. He's got some points, some gravy assists, some really nice passing plays. That one that they scored in like 27 seconds on that shot pass from McDavid to Draisaitl right in front of the net. That was about the prettiest power play goal I've seen in forever. So that's a really good sign. I did want to ask you before we moved on to another topic that we had mentioned at the beginning of the show here. What are you making of the rumors about Timo Meier? Like the Elliot Friedman, bombshell that the Oilers are actually pitched for Timo Meier out of San Jose and put an offer together. And it was just San Jose choosing New Jersey, which we believe probably had more to do with the quantity of the draft picks going over, things like that. But it sounds like Ken Holland really tried to make a push for this. And the idea here was that they're going to go, okay, well, this is going to give us the best chance to win and go on a major run in the playoffs here. We'll figure it out in the offseason. Probably won't sign the player, but we can trade him if he has like a fantastic run at the end of the season in the playoffs. And he might even be worth more than we're about to give up to get him, so we can make a net profit on this player. Like, Ken Holland was really thinking out of the box there and really going for it, right? Because we did not hear the Oilers on the Timo Meier radar at all. Yeah. So that one, when I heard that one, that was a real shock to me. I like the idea of it for sure, but what did you make of that whole story?
Yeah, so I think, well, first, like you said, no one heard about it. And I think it kind of goes to show just how much Holland was poking around kind of ahead of this deadline. There was obviously tons of things that you did hear about, the Carlsons, Chychrons, and then you didn't really hear about Ekholm a ton until a couple of weeks before it happened. And then, like you said, with Meier, not a word. So I think, yeah, he was going around a lot more than maybe people had realized. And as far as Meier goes, I think some maybe didn't realize that he was just an RFA at the end of the season. So what that does, and what I'd seen in your article, is if they weren't able to re-sign him, which obviously probably would have been difficult, you're seeing kind of what he signed out with New Jersey. It'd have been tough for Edmonton to fit that in. But you could trade him at the deadline or something. He has at least one more year and get a significant amount back. Maybe not as much as you paid, but it helps like soften that blow. So getting a guy in like that would have been massive. Obviously, it would make what I would say is already the best forward group in the league, at least top forwards wise, that much scarier. So that would have been huge. And obviously it's too bad they couldn't pull it off, but it would have been tough, I think, to put the best offer out there, and just to make things work from a money perspective would have been difficult. But credit to Holland for making what seemed like a pretty good push for him.
It would have emptied the draft cupboard for sure, right? You're talking about the 2024 first round, or you're talking about a second round, or you're talking about prospects, you're talking about, like, would you have cared? Like, if you landed Timo Meier and you're like, holy crap, we just got Mattias Ekholm, we got Timo Meier, we got Nick talk about, maybe you don't get Nick Bjugstad after that happens, but you've got two of the biggest fish and the biggest names moving in the trade deadline this season, both coming to the Oilers. Do you care at that point that you've emptied the shelf of whatever you had for draft picks and things like that? Or, like I said, and like you just pointed out, you can move it and get some of that back, maybe get a 2023 first rounder back if you do it before the draft, right? So do you even care at that point? You're just like, nope, doesn't matter. Timo Meier, Mattias Ekholm, we are way better than we were before.
Yeah, I think as we've talked about it, like, this team's in a win now, and you don't kind of know what the future holds 3-4 years from now. And if one of their two big guys or both of them were to leave in free agency, then that first round pick or that prospect right now probably doesn't mean a whole lot anyway. They're going to go through some rough years at that point. So I think you got to go for it now. And like you said, like, they would have lost some significant pieces, but if they couldn't sign Meier, which I couldn't really see happening, then they would have been able to at least get a little bit back to help replenish it a bit. But I've kind of been on the train the whole time, even when I was saying to trade for Chychrun when the price was seemed higher than what it ended up being, that you got to win now. You got to make these moves now. So no, I wouldn't have really been too worried about that at all. Kind of worry about the future later on.
Yeah, it certainly would have sent a message. That's for sure. That Holland wasn't messing around here. This is something he was going for. Let's switch gears a little bit, talk about one of the sort of negatives that's been going on here over the last couple of weeks, and let's talk a little bit about Jack Campbell's game. You wrote an article just recently about the idea that maybe the Oilers might have to. Now, we're a little early on this one, but you never know. If he doesn't turn it around by the end of the season and it's Skinner all the way and Campbell struggles even in a backup role, that maybe you have to look at moving him. Maybe a buyout is the only option if you can't move him. What's going on with Jack Campbell? Like, we've got the story about around him is that he's hot and cold, and we've already seen it at Edmonton, even in his short time here. Not so good to start the season. Went on a massive streak of like 9 in a row, looked really solid, and now all of a sudden he seems to have lost the mental edge again, and it doesn't look good. I don't feel like it's like a disaster yet, but there are some softies he's letting in some of these games. And what I will say is that you can't score 5-6 goals a game and lose. You know what I mean? Like, the Oilers are scoring like crazy and still not winning some of these games. And part of that is because Campbell's letting in a couple softies. So what's the story with Jack Campbell? Like, what happens here? Do you just run Skinner all the way to the rest of the season and you fit Campbell in? Do you try to figure out a way to get Campbell back on track here? Like, what do you do if you're Jay Woodcroft?
So there's not a lot you can do kind of in between now and the end of the season. You got to ride it out and just hope there's something that changes. But one of the big things when he was brought over from Toronto, and you heard about it while in Toronto, is that his mental game it's a struggle. And as a goaltender, that's maybe one of the biggest parts of being a goalie, especially at the NHL level, where as a starter, you're usually asked to kind of play night after night kind of thing. So that's been a factor. And like, he obviously went on that little stretch, like you said, but even during that time, like, his numbers really weren't that great. He had 4 games in that stretch with the save percentage. It was almost below 900. So it's almost like the team, even at that time, was just playing a bit better in front of him. And I don't know, it just hasn't worked this first year in Edmonton. And like I said, I think it's a domino effect. There was a shaky start, and I think just the mental game after that just wasn't able to recover. And we kind of talked about that between, say, him and like a Mike Smith, where there's just not really much of a comparison there in terms of guys being able to bounce back versus not. So it's been a struggle. And as far as what they do, I don't know, because I mean, you see the buyouts and the savings they would get for the next 4 years, but then that's 4 years of dead cap after that. So I mean, that's a big risk. You're seeing that the James Neal deal still on with the Oilers right now, and kind of that crutch that's put them in a bit. So it's a tricky situation. I think you just hope that somehow something's able to click and he bounces back. But to this point, I personally haven't seen a lot that gives me confidence that could happen. That said, I mean, the goaltending, it's an interesting position. There's guys that kind of seem to bounce back, have down years. So you're hoping that's the case here.
Yeah, I would say at this point, it's probably way too early to look at a buyout even in the off season. Like, I think you got to run at least one more season. And at the end of this next season, if it's still not good and you're running like 80-20 percent Skinner and 20% Campbell, where like Skinner's getting 60 games or something, 65, then you got to go, okay, well, we need another backup here because it's just too many games for Stuart Skinner to be playing. I think Skinner is going to be really, really solid. Like, I have a feeling that he's your starter, even if Campbell finds his game. I think Skinner's just a better goaltender, and I think he's going to become a much better goaltender. I think it's only going up for him. Like, the ceiling is, sky's the limit for him in terms of what he can become. And the Oilers did really well to lock him in at the deal that they did, and we'll see where that goes. But if you're going to do the buyout thing, you probably got to do it at the 2-year window. You can't move him. Maybe if he has a solid run for 20 games next season and you have the opportunity to sell high, then you try. But at this point, I think you got to give him at least more than one season to just try to figure it out. And if you can't, then I guess you deal with it then. But yeah, it is a little whatever. Are you running Skinner at this point? Like, the guy's still a rookie, technically he's a rookie. So are you comfortable going, yeah, he's shown me enough that we can just run with him and he's our guy. And unless something disastrous happens between now and the end of the year, he's our guy in the playoffs too.
It's unfortunate, but I'm more comfortable with that than I am at this point, I think, giving Campbell starts just based off what you've seen. Like, this last little funk he's in here, it's like you said, they're scoring 5 goals a game and losing. And it's just, I don't know. Like, I think, like you said, it is a lot to ask out of Skinner. It's kind of just a young guy, rookie in the NHL, and it's a lot of games. Then you have to hope he still has the energy for the playoffs and everything. But unfortunately, they just don't have a big enough cushion right now where they can kind of sit back and wait for Campbell to snap out of this. Like, they dug themselves in a hole early when he was struggling, and we were kind of hoping then he could figure it out down the stretch of the season. And now we're here, and he still hasn't. And they just, like, they're obviously, the Flames are a ways back, as are the Predators, for catching them in that wild card race, but not enough where you can let your foot off the gas just yet. And obviously they have bigger ambitions of still winning first in the Pacific. So I think you really do have to kind of roll with Skinner. Obviously any other back-to-back sets give to Campbell, but at this point I think it's Skinner's crease for sure.
Yeah, and I've heard some people say, "Oh, we'll bring up Calvin Pickard." Well, you can't send Campbell down, right? You had to do that before the deadline. So it's call him down, bring him back up, and then you have that flexibility. But we're past that now. So he's got to figure it out in Edmonton, and he's got to figure it out on back-to-back starts. Basically, like that's probably what you're looking at here. Any back-to-back games, he gets the second or he gets the first of the two, and go from there. You can't even play them against lesser opponents to try to get it, because the Oilers don't play very well against lesser opponents. Exactly. They've been beaten by Columbus twice. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it just is what it is. It's too whatever. Okay, having said that, let's move on to a much more positive topic and talk a little bit about Connor McDavid. I don't know what you say about this guy that you haven't already said, that it hasn't already been talked about. 124 points now in the season, broke his own career high. It's 3 goals, 54 goals. What's he at?
54.
Yeah, like it's crazy. And he's just finding new ways to score, and he scores 2 of the 3, the other night, and basically the game winner on the fly, going across the other side. Like, just sweet, nice, amazing goals that you didn't see from him the year before that, because he's finding out new ways to get it in there and do what he's doing. What are you making of what he's doing? Like, is he going to slow down? Like, do you just even get the sense that this isn't going to do anything but keep this pace or even more?
Yeah, I mean, slow down. Like, he's been on an absolute tear this last little while. I mean, when hasn't he been this season? But I mean, maybe a bit from this last little stretch. But yeah, he's not going to slow down. I think you're just seeing a guy that's highly motivated. I think last season, maybe kind of the talk again, once Matthews had his 60-goal season, and kind of hearing that almost the 1A, 1B, I think that kind of stuff motivates him more than maybe some people realize. And he really kind of made it a mission this year, not just to prove that he's the best player in the NHL, but the best goal scorer too. You heard Draisaitl talking about it for the season, that he really wanted to score a lot of goals this year. And he's good enough that he sets his mind to something, he can do it. So I think, yeah, he's not going to slow down much before the end of the year. I think it's kind of funny. You look back to that COVID shortened season when they played in the all Canadian division there, and he had, what was it, 105 points or something in 56 games.
Yeah.
And
Or like, can he do it? Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of talk about how kind of stat padding against the Senators, it wouldn't happen in a regular division. And he didn't quite get to that pace this year, but I think he missed it by like 4 points or something. So he's just an incredible talent, and only getting better too is the scary thing. So I'm excited to see what he can do, not only this year and in the playoffs, but just future seasons as well, because it's incredible to watch.
Yeah, they showed a stat the other night that he has more 4-point games in the season than he has no point games this season, which is unreal. Like, when you think about that, how many players in the NHL in any one season have 4 points in a game? It's got to be what you can count on 2 hands. Like, it's just so unreal to hear that he's got more 4-point games in one season than he has no point. And that's insane. It's just crazy. I'll tell you the other thing. Draisaitl's been on a little bit of a roll here, but I want to, like, maybe this is an unpopular opinion. I did not think he started the other game very well. I thought he sort of looked lazy. He sort of looked like his head wasn't in it. He was making some passes he probably shouldn't have made. But McDavid being McDavid and sort of elevating things, Draisaitl caught up a little. Like, he was just not as good, obviously, but like, he just sort of turned the game around a little. He's kind of like, okay, I should probably pick up my pace here a little bit. Like, this is kind of, so I think they push each other, like Draisaitl pushes McDavid to, McDavid goes out and says, okay, well, fine, I'll score 50 this year. And then, but Draisaitl, in doing that, doesn't want to be left behind as the guy who's just really way down the ladder in terms of first and second place. So then Draisaitl picks up his game, and the two of them together, it's amazing, because one can bring the other one into the game, even though McDavid's always seems to be in the game. Like he's never taking a night off. Draisaitl has that tendency every once in a while to just sort of come in a little haphazard, sort of half-assing the thing. And then he just finds a way to get really good. But it took the other night, I think, McDavid picking up the pace for Draisaitl to go, oh, all right, maybe I should start to work a little harder. Like it just, I thought he had a great game by the time it was all said and done, but I believe that was probably because of McDavid and just how good he was in that game. That Draisaitl was like, yeah, all right, I guess that's the kind of game we're having tonight, right? Like it's a fun thing to watch when you see those two going at it. The question everybody's going to ask now: 150 points, 70 goals. Can he do it? I think 60 is well within reach at this point, right? Like he's 54, he's got whatever, he's got 20 or 17 games left. 60 is a given, I think. Do you think he does 70 though?
So what's that? 16, and you said 17 games?
Yeah, I think they got 17 games.
Oh man, I mean, I remember again that all Canadian division year. I was questioning. I thought all season there was no chance at 100 points, and he proved me wrong there. So I mean, do I think he does? Probably not. That goal a game pace I think is tough to sustain, but like it's Connor McDavid. There's really nothing in it anymore that he does that even shocks me. It's just, I don't know. It seems like there's almost nothing he can't do. So I'll say he ends up a bit short, maybe in that, I don't know, 65 to 68 range, but 150 points for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to get to 160.
Yeah, no, I'm sure 70's tough. It's you don't ever bet against him, right? Because he's been, he had 5 games in a row with 2 goals a game. Like that's 10 and 5. Like it's possible. He could do it in 10 games. Like that's the reality of what he's been doing this year, right? So it's hard to bet against him. I'm not sure that I would bet on it, but I certainly wouldn't take the under. Like I'm not, like, yeah, no, he's not doing it, because he absolutely could do it. Like it's just, it's crazy. And what is so amazing, and we talked about it before we came on here, is that it completely overshadows everything else that the rest of the team is doing, which is also pretty solid. Like David, Draisaitl's having a fantastic season. Nugent Hopkins is having a career year. Zach Hyman's got 30. Like these guys are really stepping up. Who's the guy that's been the most noticeable for you? Like when you were talking about, tier 2 players that are expected to do a lot more and pop in that production, like who's really been standing out for you?
Just in terms of basically not the McDavid Draisaitl.
Right. Like the guys that you're like, so that we can say, and we can shove it down people's throats when they're like, well, you're just McDavid and you're just Draisaitl. If those two weren't doing anything, you guys would be terrible. Clearly that is not the case. Like if you look at the rest of the stat lines for the roster, there's a lot of really solid players that are contributing. And I mean, I wrote an article today on Hockey Writers about the top 4 between Toronto and Edmonton and just how far that gap is. And there's only one person in Toronto's top 4 that has more points than the lowest guy in Edmonton, which is Zach Hyman. And it's still really close. Like they're just really good. And this is without Evander Kane yet. He's only played 20 whatever games this season, 24 to 25 games. So who's the guy that's sort of been that tier 2, tier B player that's really kind of pulled his weight here too?
I'm curious to hear your answer after, but for me, it's easy. I've been trying to argue it for years, even before when people have said it. He's been my favorite Oiler for a long time now, but it's Nugent Hopkins. I think you're fine. Like he's always been just such I found underrated 2-way guy that has been just such a clutch member for the Oilers, that has never complained, went through some really tough years there, has had a crazy amount of coaches. I can't even think off the top of my head how many, and just continues to show up every day, do his work, sign that what I think is a team-friendly extension, and is finally having a year that I've kind of always been wanting to see him have. Like we've known that he has the skill. Anyone that's watched close enough, he's got like a really underrated shot. He's a good playmaker, and it seems like a lot of the talk that you see this year is kind of almost talking how it's all power play production, and I just always kind of laugh at that. Even with McDavid Draisaitl, you see some of that too. And if it was that easy to score in the power play, every team would do it. Every guy on every team would have this many points. Like it's a skilled thing, and there's a reason that they're doing it. It's because they're some of the best players in the world. So that's the guy for me. I think it looks like he could get 100 points this year. And yeah, I think he's just such a dynamic piece of their team that's been underrated for a long time now.
Yeah, Nugent Hopkins is definitely one of those guys. And just for the sake of being different, I'll say Zach Hyman for me. Nugent Hopkins probably would have been my vote too. Like But if you look at Zach Hyman and you look at what he's done this season, and you look at what he's probably going to do this season, and then you consider what's been taken away from him this season and how many goals, I think it's like 6 or 7 that have not counted.
I won again the other night.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, so some of that is like, okay, seriously, stop opening the goalie because you know it's going to be called back. But at the same time, I don't want him to do that because you sort of need him to be there. So the ones that do count, and you'll take the bad from the good just because you know he's in there. He's fighting for that spot. He's making it work. And even when he's not the most noticeable guy, and he's always almost noticeable because he works so hard and he does everything right. He's that player that you're kind of like, man, that guy never takes a night off. Even when he's not on, he's still contributing in some way, whether it's mucking it up or getting in there on the forecheck or doing whatever he's got to be doing. But then when you think, oh, I haven't really heard much about Zach Hyman, he scores one, right?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you're just like, holy moly, this guy's got like tons of points. And you realize how good a goal scorer he is and how useful he is and how different he is than this skill. He's skilled, but he's not like the Draisaitl, McDavid, Nugent Hopkins kind of skill. He's that really work hard, blue collar skill that you need on a team. Whereas Evander Kane's really skilled, but he's also like gritty and he's happy to get right in the middle of it all. And he's got a good deflection. He's smart. You know, they've got that assortment of offensive pieces. And so Hyman is never going to get the credit that he deserves, but I don't think he cares. I think he's just like, look, man, just let me do my thing and I'll come in and play my part. And he's been really solid for me too. To the point where I think it really angers Maple Leafs fans that that's one that got away from them because he's really good. Like I didn't know that watching Toronto as much as I watched him. He sort of flew under the radar there too, but he is no wonder they're mad because he's just really, really good. So I probably would have voted Nugent Hopkins too, but Hyman definitely gets a runner-up trophy for me on that one. But there's been other pieces too that have been really good. So the depth is stepping up, and that's what you need because you're going to need it all in the playoffs. Even the guys like Janmark and McLeod, those guys have, and Warren Fogle started to play really well. Like they're all stepping up. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Absolutely. All right, Colton, that's good, man. Let's we'll leave it there for now. We'll call it a show and hope that the Oilers have a good one. They don't play again until Thursday against the Boston Bruins. They had a good matchup with Boston. Didn't come out on the winning end of things, but not too many people do when they're playing the Bruins. What do you think is going to happen here in this game? Are you going to go as far as to predict a win for the Oilers with the Bruins? Or do you think it's just going to be another really close game? What do you think happens with that one?
They're on the road for this one?
They're in Boston, I think. Yeah.
I mean, they've been playing well lately, and I don't really have a lot of complaints about how the Oilers have been overall as of late, but it's so hard to picture. Like the Bruins are so good, and they got even better at the deadline somehow. So I want to say the Oilers, but if I'm being honest, I've got to pick the Bruins in this one. I do think it'll be a close game again. I think the Oilers played them tight last time. No team really outplayed the other, but I'll say a 4-3 win for the Bruins.
Okay, I'm with you. I think that this is a team that everybody's going to struggle against. They're playing even well when you lose like Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno and you're still winning like crazy. Like guys are just really doing everything they're supposed to be doing in Boston, and they're just a very tough team to beat. But I do like the way the Oilers played against them last time.
Yeah.
So I'll say the Boston Bruins win, but I'm going to pluck a point out for the Oilers. Like I think they can get it to overtime. Even if they tend to lose, if you could walk away from that game getting a point, and even better if somebody else in the Pacific Division loses and you gain even a point's worth of ground in that tight division, then that's a win for me. So I'll say that maybe Bruins win this one, but hopefully the Oilers can get it to overtime. If we're lucky and they play really well, they'll actually beat Boston this time, which I think is super possible. But I'll go Boston too. I'm going to say they keep scoring. I think it's going to be high. 4-3 or 5-4. I think that's probably going to be where we're at. I don't think it's going to be a low scoring affair by any means, but probably Boston, but let's hope the Oilers can make it a tight one and get a point out of that one.
For sure.
All right, Colton, thank you very much. For everybody else, this has been another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. We appreciate you watching and listening. Don't forget, check out all the other content on the YouTube page, on the podcast. Check out the Hockey Writers, Colton's work and my work. Everybody else over there putting some great information together. We're still writing like crazy, even though the trade deadline's over. So check out all the articles, and we'll keep you posted. Until the next time, talk to you on another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. Take care, everybody.